various ways to actually, I don't know whether you have started recording. If not, you can start the recording. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So our great rishis have actually devised various methods of upasana. That is, the way of knowing our supreme self, Brahman, right? And they have come up with various mantras, as you know, right? So, and mantra samhitas, and in the first class we saw that, the various layers of mantra and the Vedas and Upanishads and all that. So they came up with this brilliant idea of the something called as Shabda Brahman. Shabda Brahman is like, one sound symbol that symbolizes the entire, the supreme self, actually, right? The entirety, uh, as in just one sound, one syllable. And what that is Om. And the beauty of this particular Om, the mantra is, you might have seen that before any mantra, right? We generally say Om Namah Shivaya, Om Narayana Namah, right? Or even the ones that we chant during the beginning of the class, Om Sahana Vavatu, right? So why there is Om in front of each and every mantra, and what does Om symbolize, right? So before I go into that, any reflections on what you know about Om or what you think Om might be?
Haribhai, what I have read or heard from people is it's the universe sound or the vibration, ultimate vibration sound. And uh, yeah, I mean, I don't know the details of that, but it is probably the one of the perfect sounds that the universe always hums around, right? And I think that's why it's so powerful. But that's what I've heard. Yeah.
Any other thoughts? Okay, so Om typically consists of three sound sounds actually, and then there is a fourth part of it. So what are the three sounds? A, U, M. A, U, M, and silence. So that is A, U, M, and silence. So that's what Om is, right? So it is the most simplest way of reminding you about the supreme self or the Atman or the Brahman in us. How? If you look at, let's say, in Jagrat state, how are we? We are like fully awake, right? Fully awake, and that is symbolized by ah. When we open our mouth, ah, fully awake, right? Then we go to the dream state. A little bit we have shed the experience of the body. Then we are just going inside. Ooh. Then we are in the deep sleep state where we don't know anything about the dream state, Jagrat or Supna state. We have just right, it's closed. So from an experience point of view, from then going to dream state, and then to the deep sleep state, we have withdrawn ourselves. And then there is complete silence. And the silence denotes the one supreme that is behind these three states: Jagrat, Swapna, Sushupti. Right? So U, M, and then silence. So that silence is something which we do generally, people just say Om, 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 Om. No. Whenever you are chanting Om, remember that there is a silence. Om. So where are we coming to? Om. A, U, M, silence. So from Jagrat, so what is it? What does it symbolize? It symbolizes your sadhana. You are going from your waking state, that consciously, right? You are going through that every day. So consciously, we are withdrawing ourselves from the waking state, that is from Stula Sharira to Sukshma Sharira to Karana Sharira, and then to to the ultimate reality, which is beyond these three. So to remind us, the rishis have come up with this wonderful idea of one sound. Just look at the beauty of it. Just one sound, and the entire whatever we have explained till now in the class, in our sessions, is captured there. Jagrat, Swapna, Sushupti, and it's the greatest sadhana that one can undergo, right? So whenever you hear Om, and it is not difficult at all, right? You are not being asked to chant thousands of mantras. Of course, you can do that, but if you really understand the meaning of the word Om, that sound, just one sound, right? That sound itself is powerful and capable of taking you to your inner self if you really understand the meaning, and then if you do what the mantra says, that is withdraw yourself, consciously withdraw from the stula sukshma karana, and then you get stationed yourself in that silence, which is what we try to do in a meditative state, or what we are trying to achieve here. So that's the biggest sadhana of all, right? So you don't, if you are not, see, there are various, the people might be reluctant to do a lot of things, like, do a lot of japa upasana. Even if you are not doing it, right, just Om is enough. But you, with all the dedication, if you are doing it, just understanding this principle behind Om, that is and silence, that Om symbolizes that. And this is from an individual self. Now we are going to see the samashti, which is your the creation manifestation. So not just from an individual self, even from the worldly perspective also, the same Om, that once you study the samashti, you will understand that both, that is vyashti and samashti, the macro and micro, is getting tied to one simple source, the single source of Brahman, or that one supreme power. So even if you look at from a Vyashti or Samashti point of view, Om will help you to withdraw and then be stationed in that supreme self if we are chanting it with understanding, with that devotion, right? That's what Om symbolizes. Any thoughts here?
This may not be true, Haribhai, but I was told earlier by someone else, and I think there it was broken down into her, and ma, that Om sound. And also, I think one thing at that time they mentioned that when you, as you mentioned, that when you say O, it is from your mouth. When you say her, it goes little bit inside, and then when you go to ma part, it goes towards more towards your stomach when you are creating that sound. And so that's what at that time explained, that it is connecting you to this to your inner side.
Right. So it's not ha, because there are two sounds that you used to be there in
Mhm.
the ancient times. Om is one. Then the next is aham,
Okay.
right? Because aham also is your real nature, is what? Is the supreme self. So people used to do chant aham as well. So
Okay.
that's where this aha comes, right? Aham is actually similar. Aha. Right? So that again symbolizes. And what you just mentioned about, right, in terms of the taking you inner and it comes from stomach, right? So that is another form of explaining it. Because if you look at, there are four different ways or different stages actually before one produces a sound as per our scriptures. It is called as para, pashyanti, madhyama, and vaikhari. So these are the four stages. So when I'm speaking now, right, the voice that is coming out has gone through these four stages. That is para, pashyanti, madhyama, and vaikhari, which means it starts from the seed of prana. Because if life is not there, I'll not be able to speak now, right? So that layer is called as the para. That is beyond that. That itself is like the subtlest layer. Then it comes to the layer of pashyanti. Pashyanti is like, that's when we get that fire from the stomach, right? And then Madhyama is from your chest portion, and then Vaikari is your throat here, that the Adam's apple, as we call it, right? From there the sound is produced. So that are the four layers. And if you take it that way also, because all this explanation is as per the temperament of the seeker, right? So there are various ways of explaining it. So you can, if you are looking at aham that way, you can say that ah is at the Vaikari layer or at the throat layer, right? And then the Madhyama layer becomes your u, right? And then Pashyanti is your stomach layer. And then the para is beyond, that is the silence. So again, four layers there. The same thing, a, u, ma, silence. And para is the silent layer, right? Or the aham layer from the life from which this is produced. So para, Pashyanti, Madhyama, Vaikari equals your a, u, ma, and silence. That's the way to look at it. And again, I'm just explaining. I told you, I think, if you remember, the one word, this Om itself will take about 2-3 sessions. That's how profound it is. But then I'm just, quickly running it through. But you are right. So there are various aspects of it. From a sound layer, this is how it's interpreted.
Thank you, Aribhai. Thanks for explaining.
So shall we go to the next part of it? And
Yes, thank you, Haribhai.
please do remember the Om, what it signifies whenever you hear, whenever you chant, right? Because that itself is powerful enough to take you to the contemplative mood or the meditative mood that you want to achieve, right? Whenever you are sitting in the seat of contemplation or meditation, right? So that principle should never be forgotten, because that principle itself is the base for all the Vedas, all scriptures that we have. It is always asking us to seek who we really are, what's our true nature. So that's what it is talking about. So we should always think about this principle always.
Haribhai,
Yeah.
when I try to sit and do meditation, and if I chant Om, within
Hmm.
few minutes I sleep, rather than I go into like kind of zone. Is there any like what shall I do? So because
You kind of go into what? Sorry, I didn't hear that.
if I sit and try to go into meditative state, and if I chant Om, in few minutes I will like fall for sleep.
Hmm. So that's about the uh, kind of gunas that we all have, right? It's not just the problem that you are facing. So there are a lot of people who are saying the same thing, right? We go to sleep. See, what's happening there is that, and we will of course see that here. So we all have, and let me touch upon the topic here. We all have three different kinds of gunas. Have you heard about this anywhere?
No, no.
Satogun,
Yeah,
something like that. But
yeah, yeah,
Rajogun,
yeah,
Tamogun.
yeah. Sattvic, Rajasic, Tamasic, right? There are three gunas that is inherent within all of us. So the Sattva gun is uh, the quality layer, which actually helps us in doing our studies, understanding, and even meditation, right? All that, the power to seek the knowledge, right? Or, to understand something, to learn something, and to maybe become a scholar, not just from a Vedantic perspective. I'm telling from an overall, or each human is made up of these three qualities, right? So you seek and you try to learn, you try to understand something, comprehend something. So that's kind of a knowledge perception layer. That is what Sattvic guna is. Then you have the Rajasic guna. So the Rajasic is like, when you want to conquer and achieve something, like, this is primarily the predominantly this has been evident in warriors, kings, politicians, right? Where they want to conquer, achieve, be something. I want to be this, I want to be that. So that kind of a warrior quality wherein I want to achieve. So मुझे ये करना है, मुझे वो मिलना है. So that kind of conquering mentality is what is like rajasic. The tamasic is when you actually are not open to logic, and you are like being in a dormant state, lazy, and you just want to like just kind of sleep, rest. There are people who you see that uh, even after 10 hours of sleep, and then they wake up, they come and have tea, and then when you ask, they'll say that I'm going to sleep. Why? Because I didn't have a good night's sleep yesterday, I want to rest again, right? So kind of that. So the laziness, and tamasa is like the lazy, uh, and dormant kind of a state. So sattvic, knowledge, perception; rajasic, want to conquer, want to achieve kind of a state; tamasic, dormant and lazy and all that, right? Sleepy kind of thing. Now we all have these three qualities within us. No individual is an exception, right? And in fact, our, of course, this is a different topic, but I'm just touching it here. Our Varnasrama Dharma, right? The Brahmana, Kshatriya, Vaishya, Shudra, is classified based on these three qualities, the predominance of these qualities, right? And it got a very wrong misinterpretation later on. But the people or who are like knowledge seekers, they are more into the category of sattvic. The people who are like warriors are more into the category of the rajasic. And the people who are like the tradesmen and all that, who we call as vaishyas, they have a mix of both rajasic and tamasic gun. And then the other people, right, they have a bit of dormant, and also not much into the other categories, is put into the fourth category, right? But now the point, coming back to the question that Sandeep Bhai asked. So what happens is, we at any point of time, right, we have a predominance or a mixture of these qualities. And if you look at what differentiates me from you or you from the other person, is the permutation combination of these qualities. So what defines our character, what defines our personality, is the difference in these qualities: sattvic, rajasic, tamasic. And you can have umpteen permutation combinations of this, and that's what defines the character. Now we all will go through all these three gunas, wherein one guna is predominant during some part of our day, right? As an example, when we are sitting here, and if you are earnestly listening to this, now your sattvic quality is predominant, because you are trying to learn, you are trying to understand, right? At the same time, let's say you are doing something very intense for achieving something in your office, or let's say you're doing a sports and then you want to win a, let's say football, you want to score a goal. Your rajasic quality is more than, right? And then when you are going to sleep, the tamasic quality is there. So, and nobody can function without these three qualities. So it has to have the right mixture. So let's say when you are sitting here, if you are having the tamasic qualities predominantly, then you will tend to go to sleep, right? And successful people, and that's how they work, right? When they are trying, they are sitting some place where like a learning session, they have the sattvic quality as predominant. And when they have to achieve something, they have to have the rajasic quality. For example, you can't go to an office and feel sleepy, have tamasic as your predominant quality and try to work. It won't. So when in the seat of meditation, what is happening is that you try to go beyond, because what's happening is we try to go beyond these three shariras, right? Sukshma, stula, sukshma, karana, sharira, and then we try to see our real nature, right? Now coming back to the answer, our mind only knows two things, if you have noticed. One is, it knows how to think, right? It needs something to, like, you have seen this, I don't know how much yeah, of course, I think lot of people do chew pan, right? In the in all over India, actually. So there are people who always wants to chew pan. They can't They can't keep their mouth shut, right? So it's like that. Our mind is also like that. It has to always chew on something. If we don't have any thoughts, what happens? We go to sleep. We get bored, we go to sleep. So these are the two things that mind knows. Either have thoughts or sleep. There is nothing else that the mind knows. So if you sit in the seat of meditation, either you go for a lot of thoughts, having a lot of thoughts again and again and again. We will sit saying that, okay, we are going to sit and meditate now, close your eyes, and all the senses are closed. Now there is nothing that can disturb me. That's when you will see that the thoughts are hitting you fast because all other senses are closed, right? There is no disturbance that is coming from outside. So what can mind do? Because mind is actually, remember, mind is always projecting through these senses, trying to gather information, trying to project something, trying to respond, right? So that's how the mind functions. If it doesn't have any input from outside, then it starts your memories and whatever you want to think randomly, it starts thinking. Now, let's say you are able to control that also to a certain extent. Then what it does, the next thing that it does is you get bored, you go to sleep. So the sleep part is actually kind of good rather than having a random thought, right? But what we need to do is we need to transcend the sleep also. That's why sadhanas are there during meditation. And one of the best thing is to ask the question, right? When you're having these thoughts of sleep, who is getting sleepy or who is having this thought? Don't answer, because people generally tend to do that mistake of answering it. After learning all these scriptures, they will just sit and say, who is this? Okay, I am Brahman. I am Brahman. No need. And that's the wrong way of doing it, because I am Brahman is also a thought. I am Atman. Who am I? Am I this body? Am I this mind? Then people ask that question, but you should leave the answer there. The best thing to do in the seat of meditation, whenever you are sleepy or whenever you are having thoughts, is to just ask the question of who is feeling sleepy with that alertness, and then just leave it. It is not easy as said, right? And Krishna says this in the Bhagavad Gita that taming the mind is like, he says, Vayoriva Dushkaram. So it is like as difficult as tying the wind. But he says, Abhyasena tu kaunteya. With regular practice, you can do that. Being alert, sit and see, ask that question, because if when you are feeling sleepy, there is someone who knows that I am feeling sleepy. Ask that question, who that is. Ask the question, who's having the thoughts, right? There are multiple ways of doing it. If you have not reached that level, either you can do a japa, right? Outside japa, if you are feeling sleepy, like Om Namah Shivaya, Om Namah Shivaya, or Narayana, or Om, right? Do it outside, right? And then slowly come inside and then let it subside. Or you can, if you are an advanced seeker, you can just have that thought, right? That is, who am I? Who is getting these thoughts? Who is feeling sleepy, right? So like that. So depending on which level that you are in, which you only will know, nobody else will know, right? So there is no one shoe size that fits all, right? So where you stand, you need to start from that point. So if you are just a beginner, you can start with chanting the name of the Lord, or trying to fix your mind on an idol, like Shiva, Krishna, whoever your favorite Lord is, right? Or even anything like a lamp, whatever that you want to, right? Just try to fix your mind in that. And it is difficult, but it will take time, practice, but you will be successful. If you are a bit advanced, then you can do this exercise of who's getting this, who's getting this, who's getting this, and then don't answer. It will automatically come to you. That's how it is. Does that answer the question, Sandeep bhai?
Yes, yes.
Okay. So now let's go to the PPT, which is can you see my screen?
Yes, but it
Okay.
is not like zoomed in yet. I mean, to
Okay.
the main page.
Right. Yeah. So now we are going to see this. Brahman, Maya, we have already seen this, right? What is manifestation? As I was mentioning, there is no, the concept of when we say Srishti in Sanskrit, in Vedantic terms, you should understand that as manifestation and not creation, which is mentioned in the English language. So creation is not equal to manifestation. So manifestation, whenever we say Srishti, it is manifestation. Then Karana Shariras, evolution of Karana Shariras, Sukshma Shariras, and Stula Sharira. Now, Jagat, what is Jagat? So here we are talking about these things. That is Jagat, evolution of 5 elements. Just, yeah, evolution of 5 elements. So Jagat, so I'll chant. Adat Chaturvimshati Tattva Patipragaram Vakshamaha Brahmasraya Sattvavarja Tamogunatmika Maya Asti, evolution of 5 elements. Tada Akasha Sambhudaha Akashadvayuhu Vayostejaha Tejes Apaha Abhya Prithivihi. Right. So what it is talking about is Jagat, the universe, or the world that we see and how it is evolved. Now we are coming to the creation, the manifestation principle. I think we will be all interested in this, right? Because we always try to answer this, seek this, and we say that uh, you know in Vedas it is said like this, how the creation has happened. So again, whenever I am saying the creation, please understand in the form of manifestation. I am using that term creation because we are used to that term. Okay, before we go there, right? So we have always heard about this Brahman and Maya, and we have touched upon this topic earlier as well. That is name, form, and utility. Uh, so we talked about the gold and ornaments, name, form, and utility. That's what the manifestation of that gold is, as an ornament with a different name, with a different form, with a different utility. So similarly, and you can compare the gold to the Brahman and Maya to the to earrings or your necklace, or whatever that ornament is. Now let's look at the difference between Brahman and Maya. So the Brahman is the non-material principle. That is, it's like we have seen this multiple times. The closest example is the electricity, where we cannot see the electricity, but we can. It comes out in different forms and shapes as power. So the Brahman is a non-material principle, out of which the Maya, the material principle, emerges. Like the Swarna is non-material. Swarna is of course not it's a material, but then just for the example's sake, I'm just saying the Brahman is a non-material principle, and out of which the names, forms, and utilities have risen. That is a material principle. Brahman is again Nirguna. Nirguna means what? Nirguna means it doesn't have its own qualities. Again, like the electricity, right? If it is coming out through a grinding machine, the grinding power comes out. If it's through music system, the music comes out, right? But if you ask whether the electricity has got music in it, whether it has got grinding in it, no, right? So the electricity doesn't itself have got anything, right? It's the power, but when it comes out through that particular instrument, it gets transformed into that power. So we can say that electricity is Nirguna, and grinding power through coming through mixie is Saguna. So that itself gets, the Nirguna gets transformed into Saguna when it comes in touch with whatever that uh, power is, right? Whatever that instrument is supposed to be doing. So, but without the electricity, none of these instruments will work, right? So that's when it gets transformed to Saguna. So Brahman is Nirguna. It doesn't have any qualities attached to itself, right? But it gets transformed into Saguna. So Brahman is a layer which we have seen already. It is never subject to change, because remember what we studied when we are studying the Satchidananda, the definition of Sat. Sat kim kalatrayebi tishtad yat sat. Right? So whatever is like in an unchanging state, that is never subject to change, that is a Brahman. Because see, for anything to change, what it needs, whatever that you see, any change happens within the time and space, right? There is nothing that is not changing that you see, perceive, even, even we talk about the world, as told by science, as we know, it was not there. The universe was not there billions and billions of years ago. Now it is there, maybe billions and billions of years after, it might not be there. So there is a start point, there is an end point, there is a changing in between, constantly changing. Whereas the Brahman is never subject to change, because Brahman is the power that is powering the change. And if you look at from the Maya perspective, Maya never remains the same, because it is always inside the time space continuum, right? The time space, whatever is inside the time space continuum, is subject to change. So it never remains. And if you look at our own self, we know that, right? When we were born, we were in a different form and shape. Now we are different. Tomorrow, we will be much more older, or things will change. So nothing in this world as you see it, even though it might, for some, it might take more time, for some, it might take less time, but there is nothing in the world that is not subject to change. We all know that. So Maya, it has got the characteristic that it always changes, because it is inside the time space continuum. Brahman is outside of the time space continuum, which itself gives rise to time and space, so it's never subject to change. And then we saw the Nirvikalpa aspect of it, which is omnipotent and omnipresent. And we saw that when we are discussing about Atman, we saw it is the one, there is only one, which is when it is omnipotent, omnipresent, it is just one supreme power that's powering everything, which we call as Brahman, Atman, Prana, whatever you want to call it, right? Whereas when it manifests as Hari, Pradeep, Sandeep, right? It is different, because we are feeling that life, I have a different life. We all say that, right? I have a different life. You have a different life, right? So the prana, we think that our soul is different. That's the power of Maya, right? It is always, it makes you believe that we are different, because that's the wheel. Maya is what Shankaracharya says, and that's the definition of Maya. Aghatita Ghadana Padiyasi Maya, which means that which is not real, but which seems to be real. But it has no reality, because it is always based on something else, which is the Brahman aspect of it. That is, the base. If that gold is not there, the ornament is not there. But we don't see gold, we see only the ornament, right? So Maya is like, from one bar of gold, let's say we are making 10 ornaments, and 10 ornaments seems to be different from us, from each other, right? So that 10 ornaments has come from the one bar of gold only, but it is always like, multiplied and seems to be different from us. So, and that's why we are not able to realize Brahman. If you ask, why am I not able to realize Brahman now, today? Because you see the change, the difference, right? You see the difference. I am different, he's different, this thing is different, that thing is different, right? And how we are perceiving and how we are seeing through these senses, and we are trying to see the battery within the torch using using the torch, right? So that's, as we said in the earlier example. So that's how it is. So this is the Brahman. There's a difference between Brahman and Maya. Once again, non-material is the Brahman, Maya is the material principle. Brahman is Nirguna, Maya is Saguna. Brahman is never subject to change. Maya is never remains the same. Nirvikalpa is omnipotent, and that is, Brahman is Nirvikalpa. It never changes. It never has any breakage. It cannot be multiplied. Maya is subject to multiplications. So this is the Brahman and Maya aspect. Any questions here before we move to the next one? No?
No.
No.
Okay. So then Now let's move to the next principle of trigunas. We talked about trigunas already. Sattvic, Rajasic, Tamasic, right? So in this particular text, from a individual perspective, that is from a micro perspective, Veshti perspective, Trigunas are not mentioned. That's why we didn't touch upon. But then when we got the chance before this itself, we just discussed about these three qualities, Sattvic, Rajasic, Tamasic. So at an individual level, we already saw how the Trigunas function. That is Sattvic, you are like having the knowledge, you are seeking the knowledge. Rajasic, you want to conquer, you want to achieve that. And Tamasic, you have your latent, dormant kind of a state. And then Tamasic also has this quality of wherein, you are adamant quite a lot. That is, whatever you believe, you will say that, okay, whatever others believe is not true, right? It is my, that quality is being a fanatic and things like that, right? That is a Tamasic quality. Now, when it comes to this, is all about whatever we discussed is about the individual aspect. How do we see these three qualities when it comes to the creation or manifestation? Now, this is the most basic principle which we should never forget. All the creation, all the manifestation that we see as the world is based on these three qualities again. Sattvic, Rajasic, Tamasic. Sattvic is the Jnana Shakti or the knowledge of perception. Rajasic is a Kriya Shakti, which is like, to do something, to achieve something, right? And then Tamasic, both are the same at the micro and macro level. The Tamasic quality is a Dravya Shakti. Here in the macro level, Dravya Shakti means any form and shape, the final stula part of it. That is, let's say if I'm talking about this phone, as per Vedanta, right? The Tamasic quality of whatever we are going to discuss now, the Brahman, right? That's what is taking the form, a particular form of it, right? So a form, the final shape is a dravya, the matter. In science terms, we can say that matter. The matter, the power of the matter or the power of shape is from the tamasic quality. So sattvic, rajasic, tamasic. So before we move forward, I just want to ensure that we are clear about what these three gunas does and how it is implied and how the manifestation happens is something that we will see later.
Okay,
Any
I'm not sure,
questions?
Haribhai, whether this question is right, but uh, we discuss about these three gunas are the foundation or a basis of the creation for as we just now discussed manifestation, I would say. Okay,
Hmm.
but when we discuss in terms of let's say plant, for example, because I could correlate these qualities with the human being, but I could not correlate this with the other lives, like form of lives, like plant, for example. What guna plant will have more dominant, or because I mean, uh, I'm not sure whether it is right question for this time, or maybe it will be addressed at later stage. But this is the thought came to my mind. Yeah.
Right. So this is a good question actually, and this will be addressed because we need to see what is the creation and manifestation, and then we can address this part, right? So the sattvic, rajasic, tamasic, three qualities: jnana shakti, kriya shakti, dravya shakti. How it will come. So let me just quickly go through the manifestation because I'm just keeping all this chanting for this class because we we are already at 6:30, so that's why, right? So the manifestation, how it happens. Okay, what are the five elements, if someone can say?
Yeah. Akash, Agni, Jala, Prithvi, Vayu. Did I say all five? Yeah.
Akasha, Vayu, Agni, Jala,
Jala, Prithvi.
yeah, Prithvi or Bhumi, as we call it, right? So no doubts in this, right? So now,
Harib, I have a doubt.
yeah,
How is Akash considered an element?
no, okay. When you say Akash, don't, it doesn't mean sky. It means space.
But space is either everything or nothing, right? Like everything is space. Like everything above us is space, right? So I mean, if you consider other planets as a part of space, then yes, there's an element. But if it's just space, it's empty, isn't it?
So okay. So now when we talk about manifestation, remember we are not just talking about uh, world as such. We are talking about anything and everything that we perceive now. I think what was that? There was a video that Sandeep Bhai sent. Remember, wherein we are there talking about the galaxies, and I don't know whether you got a chance to see that, right? So anything and everything, where does it exist?
Anything. Okay.
Space, right?
Okay. Okay. Okay.
Right. So anything and everything exists in space. Let's say it's billions of galaxies that we are talking about, or a planet, or we now sitting. What are we occupying? We are occupying space, right? So now we are just imagine before we, and it's a good point that you brought it up. Before we discuss about anything, just before we discuss about manifestation, just think that uh, there is nothing, including space. So we are just going to the base of the base layer, and then we are going to see how the entire manifestation came up. Now, see, we have seen till this layer, right? Which is this layer from an individual perspective. Now we are going to what we did. We went outside in. That is, from the Stula Sharira, Sukshma Sharira, Karana Sharira. We went outside in, and then we saw this principle. Now to understand Samashti, what we are going to do is we are going to go inside out, which means we are going to start from this layer, which is the supreme power layer, and then we are going to see how the creation happened. So just imagine, again, very difficult to explain, but just think that there is nothing, including space. Absolutely nothing at all. No creation, no manifestation, no space, no galaxies, no world, nothing. And we are going to start from this. So now our Vedas explain that how all this creation started or manifestation started, right? So the manifestation started as Brahman plus Maya. So there is uh, the first thing that happened or that got manifested from the Atman is space, right? And it's quite logical because, sorry, did anyone say anything? Okay. So what is the first thing that got manifested? Space, because we need space to accommodate anything. Yes or no?
Space is, of course.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Right. So the first thing that got manifested from the Atman or the Brahman, as you want to call it, is space. Right? So there is a sequence that is mentioned in the Vedas, which is like Ekasmat Atmani Akasha Sambodha Akashad Vayuhu Vayoragnihi Agnerapaha Abhya Pridhivi Pridhivyo Aushadibhyaha Aushadibhyo Annam Annat Purushaha. So that's the sequence, and I'll explain what it is. That's how the entire manifestation has happened. Ekasmat Atmani Akasha Sambodha. The first step, the first layer is Akasha. From Akasha, that is as the next step, the Vayu came. From Akashat Vayu, Vayor Agnihi. And again, so the question might come, okay, what about other planets? We don't think that there is Vayu, right? So the
Mm-hmm.
answer to that, sorry?
No, sir. Yes, that's correct. I mean, Vayu is an earthly term, of course,
Hmm,
but
hmm.
it may be different for different planets. Like,
Right,
yes.
right. So now from this part, that is from the space part, again, there are various texts that explains about various lokas or various worlds or planes of existence, as you call it. Okay, and that's quite vast. absolutely like, quite vast, wherein they talk about different elements and things like that. We are not touching that. Let me set that context here, because we are talking about the world now as we know it. If anyone is interested, there are books in there are mentions in the Yajurveda as well as the Samaveda, and in the Taittiriya Upanishad about various manifestations and various elements, right? But first of all, we need to understand our own earth and our own creation rather than going to the next one. So here what we are concentrating is on the first layer is a space wherein all the billions of galaxies are there. Then we are coming to the earthly aspect of it, right? So the earthly aspect, akashad vayuhu. From the next, as a next step, the vayu came. Vayor agnihi. From vayu, that is as a next step, the agni came. Agner apaha. Then from agni, the apa or jala, that is, the water came. And abhya prithvi. Then the last one that to happen out of five elements is the prithvi or the earth. That's how the manifestation happened. So think about this. There was nothing, only that supreme power or that cause. From cause came the space. From space, the next step as a vayu, as agni, as jala, as bhumi. So these are the five elements. Now we talked about, and again, I am again mentioning this because this is a very in-depth subject. This is our first text, so this is just at an overall view. I'm just taking it. There are texts like Panchikarana, which I'll talk about in a while. There are texts which talks in detail about the manifestation creation, which we can go if we want later, but that's not the content of this particular text. But we are going to see the manifestation. Each of these five elements, now they say that each of these five elements, Akasha, Vayu, Agni, Jala, Bhumi, or Prithvi, has got these three qualities. What are the three qualities? Sattvic, Rajasic, Tamasic. Sattvic is the knowledge of perception. Rajasic is that Kriya Shakti, that is, the power to do things. And Tamasic, in the manifestation or worldly sense, it is the form and shape, that is Dravya Shakti. I don't know whether any of you chant the Lalita Sahasranam, wherein there is a name that is Icha Shakti, Jnana Shakti, Kriya Shakti Surupini, right? So which means that one power is getting manifested itself as these powers, right? So now Akasha, Vayu, Agni, Jalam, and Bhumi or Prithvi, right? So these are the five elements. So what we are saying is that each of these five elements, Akasha has got sattvic quality, Vayu has got sattvic quality, Agni has got sattvic quality, Jalam has got sattvic quality, Bhumi has got sattvic quality. Similarly, again Akasha has got Rajasa, Vayu again Rajasa, Agni has got Rajasic, Jalam has got Rajasic, Bhumi has got Rajasic quality. Akasha has got tamasic quality, Vayu has got tamasic quality, Agni has got tamasic quality, Jalam has got tamasic quality, and Bhumi has got tamasic quality. Any doubts till now?
No.
One question, Hari bhai,
Hmm.
maybe you may not relate here, but while we have these five, uh, five different elements, is there a significance of which one is greater than the other, or a proportionality, or there is no angle? Are they all considered equal?
Uh, okay, so the way to look at it is actually it leads to each of these elements leads to a certain creation or manifestation or certain
Okay.
manifestation,
Yeah.
right? So once you come to know that, then if you consider one above the other, then you can look at it that way.
Right.
But let's look at it what each one has given rise to from a creation or manifestation perspective. Okay.
Okay.
Now sattvic quality. we talked about sattvic quality as knowledge or perception layer, right? That is what sattvic does.
Yeah.
Rajasic as the kriya shakti, or anything that we need to do. That is the power of doing something. Tamasic as the dravya shakti. Now let's go back a minute to whatever we learned about three shariras. What did we learn? Stula, Sukshma, Karana Sharira from an individual layer. Now think about all the living, non-living beings within these three categories. Stula, Sukshma, Karana Sharira. First of all, let's start with the humans, because that's what, Jignesh Bhai asked whether plant has got certain qualities, whether it has got a mind, whether it has got so, right. So to avoid that confusion, which we will come to that in a moment. So let's think about everyone, like the entire creation. Let's think about the humans only. So now we are going to tie that with the manifestation, because now the question will come: how has Sukshma Sharira came into existence? How has Stula Sharira came into existence? How has Karana Sharira came into existence? Right. So these things are something that we will come to know. Again, the first layer is the Karana Sharira, is Brahman and Maya. That is in our case also, in the Karana Sharira, we don't recognize anything. It's the kind of the seed state. And that seed state is mentioned here as a Karana Sharira. Now, can anyone tell that, out of this that we just saw here, which is Annamaya, Manomaya, Pranamaya, Vijnanamaya, Anantamaya, or here, let me go to the better thing, is this one, right? So which one are the organs of perception or organs of knowledge?
The Antakarana?
Antak.
Antakarana and
Then
Um,
Antakarana and the instruments which we know about, which is Jnanendriyas.
Jnanendriya.
yes. Yeah.
It makes sense? Yeah.
Yeah.
Pancha Jnanendriyas and Antakarana is actually what? Is something that is the base of perception. Right. So now what we are saying here is that which is the perception aspect of all these five elements. Akasha's sattvic element is what came as the hearing part of it, right? So Akasha is what? Space. Even if you look at, if you if something gets into the ear, or let's say you are going in a flight, what do? You put some bud on it, or you put the ear plug. Why? Because you are trying to what? You're trying to secure the space, right? Because hearing the space, right? That's the power. It comes through the space, and that's what hearing is coming from Akasha. The sattvic quality of Akasha is the hearing power. The sattvic quality of Vayu is the touch. The sattvic quality of Agni is the vision. The sattvic quality of Jalam, because Rasana is Jalam, taste. The sattvic quality of smell is the Bhumi, right? So this is how the creation is mentioned. So if you look at each of these elements, you can, if you think through, sit and think through, you will understand, right? Because let's say, uh, taste, jalam, we have our taste buds, we have our saliva through which we taste things, right? Without the saliva, without the taste buds, without the combination of that, there is no taste. The smell, actually, what? The smell is something that is coming from the prithvi. When I say prithvi, and anything and everything that is associated with it. And forget about Vedanta texts, okay, whatever we are telling here. Even if you look at from a normal science, from a naturopathy perspective, they tell the same thing. your smell is actually coming from the bhumi. That's what they say, right? So all this is coming from the base of this. Your Agni, because without light, there is no vision, right? What is Agni also has what? It has heat, which is of course there, but Agni predominantly constitutes light, the power of light, right? So Agni is vision, Vayu is touch, Akasha is hearing. I have skipped through the slokas just for the time, because of the lack of time, but this is what the sloka says. Akasha is hearing, Vayu is touch, Agni is vision, Jalam is taste, and Bhumi is smell. And Antakarana. So what are these? These are Pancha Jnanendriyas. The Sattvic element of Akasha, Vayu, Agni, Jalam, and Bhumi constitutes these Pancha Jnanendriyas plus Antakarna. Why? Logical. Sattvic is the power of knowledge or perception. So whatever we are showing as the power of whatever we have learned as the power, the instruments of perception, knowledge, including Antakarana and the Panchajnanendriyas, have come from these sattvic aspects of these five elements. Okay.
Yeah.
Right. Now comes the Rajasa. Rajasa is what? Kriya Shakti. The power to do. So
Karmendra.
Karmendriya, exactly. So the Rajasa aspect of Akasha constitutes the Vak or the power of speech. Of Vayu is Pani, hand. Agni is Pada or feet. Jalam is Upastam, is the organ of reproduction. Bhumi is the Payu or the organ of excretion, which constitutes your five karmendriyas plus pancha prana. Why? Because this again does what? This again does, it's a system, right? We saw what are pancha pranas. What does it do? It's again a form of karma that it's doing, right? It's an activity. A respiratory system is doing an activity, circulatory system is doing an activity, your reversal system is doing an activity. So anything that is required that does activities comes under the Rajasa aspect of the five elements. So Akasha's Rajasa aspect and its combination of Akasha, Vayu, Agni, Jalam, Bhumi is what is constituting the Pancha Pranas and Pancha Karmendriyas. The Sattvic aspect is what is constituting the Pancha Jnanendriyas and Antakarna. Right? And so now what is left? So we have learned everything
Mana,
here. Sorry?
Man, Aham,
No, man is here, right? Antakarna.
Aham and Buddhi and
That is Antakarna.
वो अंत कर्म में आ गया ना अंत कर्म.
Right. So if you look at Antakarna, what is Antakarna? Antakarna is Mana Buddhi Chitta Hankara. We saw that, right? So your Antakarna has got all these aspects of Mana Buddhi Chitta Hankara. So let's look at from here, right? So Pancha Jnanendriyas and Antakarana is the sattvic aspect of five elements: Akasha, Vayu, Agni, Jalam, Bhumi. Okay. The Pancha Karmendriyas and Pancha Prana is the Rajasic aspect of the five elements. So the Akasha aspect of the Rajasa constitutes the Vak. The Vayu aspect of the Rajasa constitutes the Pani, hands. The Akasha Vayu Agni aspect of Rajasa constitutes the Pada and Payu and Upastha. Right. So now what we have seen? We have seen these two. Let me. So no. So we have seen these two, that is Pancha Jnanendriyas and Antakarana. This constitutes your
Sattvic.
sattvic aspect of it.
Hari bhai, how ahankara come in Sattvic?
Why? See, we are talking about the samashti, right? The
Mm.
ahankara, actually, you're asking the question because you think that how can ego be sattvic? That's what your question is, right?
Yes, yes.
Right. So from an overall perspective, from a manifestation perspective, ego also, see, what is sattvic? Sattvic is the knowledge of perception, and ahankara is also something that we perceive. From a individual quality perspective, remember what I just said earlier. Ahankara, everything has got these three aspects: sattvic, rajasic, and tamasic as an individual. Ahankara is also a sattvic quality. Without subsidence of ahankara in our own self, right, we will not be able to understand the Brahman. Ahankara's real nature is actually sattvic. But when we tie this ourselves to something called as vasana, which we will see in this text itself after a certain point of time, that's when it becomes bad, or that's when it becomes rajasic or tamasic or whatever that is, right? So that rajasa aspect of ahankara, which we perceive today as bad, comes from something called as the vasanas. Okay, so in its purest form, ahankara is not, ego is not a bad thing. Bad thing means in its purest form, ahankara is just Brahman. And why we are saying that, we will see that later.
Yeah.
Right? So don't think that ahankara is something bad. Ahankara in its purest form is not bad. Ahankara plus vasanas is bad.
Is
Okay?
is ahankara ego or is it behavior? We call it
Ego.
ego. Okay.
Yeah. Right? Yeah, of course. Behavior is because of our ego. Ahankara is what leads to our behavior. Because behavior
Yes.
is an action, right? Whether it is in mind or
Correct.
outside, it is action. So where does that action come from? From the ahankara only, right? So
All
we will
right.
talk about this, Sandeep bhai. Just keep this in mind. And then once we progress, we'll talk about vasanas and how ahankara gets corrupted, right? We'll talk about that. Now for this one, this is the sattvic aspect. So pancha jnanendriyas and antakarana, five elements, sattvic aspects constitute this. Now the pancha karmendriyas and pancha prana, this is what is the rajasic aspect, or this is what is the kriya aspect of it, right?
Yeah.
Clear? Now what is left?
Avastha.
Avastha.
Sorry?
Avastha.
No. Okay. Yeah. Avasthas. Yeah. You can say that. But this is what? This is all your Sukshma Sharira is covered.
Shariras. Yeah.
Yeah. All the Sukshma Sharira is covered under these two. That is, your Sattvic and Rajasic aspect.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Correct? We already talked about the Karana Sharira, which is the seed form. That is the same.
Yeah.
Now what is left is the Sthula
Stula.
Sharira.
Sthula Sharir.
Right? So now let's go back to that part of it. Manifestation part. Now the Stula part is part of this something called as Akashas Tamasa, Vayus Tamasa, Agnis Tamasa, Jalams Tamasa, and Bhumis Tamasa aspect. How it is coming to shape as the Stula Sharira or the matter is what is explained, or what constitutes as a process called as Panchikarana. It's kind of a logical process that is explained. So what is Panchikarana? I think that's like, let's look at that in the next class. So like let's have the suspense there. जैसे कि वो serial में होता है ना. Let's
Sounds
stop
good.
here. Yeah.
Sounds good.
It's it's gripping. It's gripping.
Yeah.
So that Panchikarana we will see in the next class. So this is what the manifestation is. So you should be clear with the Sukshma Sharira, Karana Sharira now, and what has constituted that. The Stula Sharira we will see in the next class.
Okay. Haribhai, I just mentioning I have to drop hard at 7, so I will stop recording. But I think we are nearly there.
Yeah,
At
we
7
are
p.m.
we are
Yeah.
at 7 o'clock. So any questions before we close? Again, this will be something like that, something that you might have found it a bit difficult when you started knowing the Atman. So it's something similar. So you'll learn this. This is the first time that we are hearing about all this, right? So yeah.
I have one question, Haribhai. For Vayu Sattvic, it says it's touch, but and
Uh,
then for hearing, we've put it for Akasha. But Vayu is what when we hear it's actually air, right? So how does that relate?
no. So the hearing capability, right, is as mentioned in the scriptures. It comes from the space, from Akasha. What you're talking about is how it is getting transmitted. Probably you are talking about the sound getting transmitted to the ear through air. That is that what
Yes,
you're
yes,
talking about? Right.
yes.
So that's the perception quality of the ear as an instrument. But we are talking about the creation quality of it. How it has been created, the space. The space is what constitutes the ear. Now, let's remember one thing. So we can go into the details, right? You know how this akashas. So all of these has got four elements. Again, we are going to talk about that. Akashas element plus your Vayu's element and Jala's element, and then the other two elements, how it gave rise to each of these instruments is what we are going to look at in Panchikarana, right? Again, remember one thing, we are not going to go very in depth. We can go in depth and we should take it as a separate text. So as an example, there is a text by Sureshwaracharya who, and the text name itself is Panchikarana Vartikam, which talks about creation in detail. But why we are discussing all that? Our purpose is to understand the power behind this, right? So because we are intellectuals, we ask these questions, how this creation came into existence. So that's why that questions are being asked. We can go to the Panchikarana Vartikam if you are interested in knowing lot more about creation and all that. There is a scientific process that is explained on how one element of Akasha got mixed with other elements of the other, four elements. Because remember, there is nothing apart from these five elements, which science also agrees that, there is nothing apart from the five elements that constitutes anything and everything that you see here. Anything and everything that is created. All the rest of it are the sub elements or whatever we have created as a mixture of these five elements. The five elements constitute the base of all the creation and manifestation that we see here, right? No doubt about it, because we have all learned not in Vedanta class, but in the science classes during our childhood, right? So we can come to that. Any other questions?
Not a question, but if we also can briefly go through this as well, the process which you mentioned that Akasha was first, then Vayu came, then Agni. So how did it come into
Okay,
existence? Like,
I'll just tell you the sequence of it.
yeah, okay,
Right. Akashad Vayu, from Akasha Vayu, Vayu Agni. When I say, the sequence of till how we came. Akashad Vayu, Vayor Agni, Agni Rapaha, Abhya Pridhivi, Pridhivyo Aushadibhya. From the earth came the Aushadis. That is, your plants and everything.
yeah,
Aushadibhyo Annam, that is from these plants. Then came the food that is required for the living beings to sustain. Annath, Pranina, and Purusha, right? Then from this Anna came the Prana, that is, the Prani. Prani means the animals and Purusha. Now, these four elements are the base. Akasha, Vayu, Agni, Jalam, Bhumi. How it got manifested? With the power of Maya. Um, if you want to go a bit deeper, there is something called as Mahat Tattva and Ahankara Tattva. Mahat Tattva is the base, which is the Brahman, from where the manifestation called as Ahankara Tattva came into being. Or when I say Ahankara Tattva, the Maya. And from the Maya layer came these 5 elements of Akasha, Vayu, Agni, Jalam, Bhumi, right? And it says Sankalpa, through Sankalpa of the Brahman, or the Ahankara Tattva. How you want to, if you want to know from how Akasha, the Vayu came, then we'll have to go to the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad. So in there, it is in very detail, it is mentioned how from each of these elements, how the other elements came. I'll just give you a quick example. Fire. We see fire, right? So
Yeah.
fire, and this is an example given in the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad. The fire, there are various forms that we have seen. So the Upanishad says fire has got space and water in it. And the example it gives is if you see the fire as red, right?
Mm-hmm.
There is a small blue that you will see when you see the red fire, absolutely red. And they are talking about the example of Arani, Arani, that the one that they use for yagas, wherein they create the fire actually through Arani. It's not like we are using a lighter or something. In earlier days, they used to churn. Two
Yeah.
cups will be put in, a stick will be put in between, two cups will be put in the top and bottom, and then they will churn, and then the fire will come. So if you have seen any kind of yagas that are being performed, so there will be a red part, there will be a blue part, that is, and you can see this typically even in fires today also, right? The blue part constitutes the jala. The red part constitutes the akasha. So, and it is beautifully explained there. Uh, we will have to learn quite a lot before we learn that. Right, to be honest, I can't just explain this on the fly because there is
Okay.
a huge
Okay.
process there. But if we are explaining, right, all this in detail, we can go through that.
No, sure, Haribhai. Sure.
So yeah, so Paresh Bhai has just mentioned that, right? About the touch in the yeah. So that's right. The air is like the touch, right? So that's why each of these elements has got its qualities. Qualities are what is associated with each of the gunas, and that's how the perception ties with each of the gunas and gives rise to each of the sattvic aspect of power of hearing, power of speech, power of vision and all that. Anything else?
No, Haribhai, I read this over the break period, so I remember that it is explained somewhere. So I thought I would just mention it there.
Sure.
But yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. Yeah. So I think we can close it. So are you finding it difficult or interesting, or are you able to, is there anything that we need to change? Or is it fine the way that we are going?